All right, welcome to Drum LCK. My name's John, and today we're going to do things a little differently. I have my good friend Tucker Marshall here, and today we're going to talk about whether or not music school is really worth it for drummers. So, what's up, dude? Welcome.
How's it going? Thanks for
Yeah,
having
man.
me.
Dude, thank you so much for doing this. And the reason I really wanted to have you on for this is because I didn't go to music school, so I wanted to have both sides of the conversation. Um, but first off, I really want to kind of start out with the fact that this came up because you're a teacher as well. Your 11th and 12th grade students always come up like, I'm thinking about music school, but I don't know
hmm
if it's really worth it. And the fact is, most band directors aren't drummers, and these drummers don't really have anywhere to go to get opinions on it unless they have friends who did it before them, right?
hmm
So I kind of wanted to get your opinion on like your overall experience. I guess it's not an opinion, right? But realistically, let's start with just like what a day is like for a drum college student, like your standard day.
Yeah, a standard day can be a lot of different things depending on the student and depending on the college. For me, the first few years, a standard day was you have your basic core classes. If you go to a liberal arts college, like I went to Bowling Green State University, my liberal arts college had certain classes even within the major that you have to take, even if you're just doing a jazz degree. So I would have at 8 in the morning, I'd have a theory class on Monday morning, 8 a.m. to 8:45, then oral skills from 9 to 9:45, then piano from 10 to 10:45. And that was every single Monday morning as a lecture. And then there were two breakout classes per week per class of that. So I would have that two more times per week in a smaller breakout session because the lecture was usually 60 people or so. And
Mm,
those were really sort of, without them saying it, they were kind of weed out classes, right? So it was kind of like, are you going to stick with this? Are you really going to do this? Or are you not so interested in it?
yeah.
Because they were not necessarily um, easy classes if you didn't have a lot of that experience in high school. Like I did not. I really had to work to get through those classes. I really had to push to like learn that stuff. It came to easy to a lot of people, but
Right.
not really for me. And so then from there, you'd normally have some sort of break, and then you had some sort of ensemble in the afternoon, whether it was my combo was rehearsing, which is a 3 or 4 or 5 piece group made up of different instruments. You'd usually always have a bass player and drummer, and then sometimes a guitarist, sometimes saxophone, but really in any wind instrument and some sort of chordal instrument. So whether that was guitar, piano, or saxophone, or trumpet, or trombone, or whatever the case may be, that was your melodic instrument. And usually it was like 4 or 5 piece. And you would rehearse for an hour to an hour and a half at a time to get ready for, you had to learn certain amount of tunes or whatever. Um, and then the other thing after that was usually if you were in one of the big bands. So there were two different big bands where I went to school. There was a lab band one and lab band two, two being the lower group, one being the higher group. Um, my first year, I was in, I was not in a lab band my first year, if I'm remembering correctly. But my second year, I was in lab band two. If I think I have that right.
So what?
Um,
Just to like uh,
yeah,
open it up. What is lab band? Is that just a jam?
lab band is your typical big band.
Okay.
So it was usually 15 to 25 people, depending on how many people audition. So you usually have your 5 saxophones, 4 trombones, 4 or 5 trumpets, bass player, piano, drummer.
Now,
And that
would
was
there be
usually,
just like one drummer per?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My school was not big enough to have multiple drummers per lab band.
Okay.
I was like, I had 3 people in the drum set degree I was in. So it was not very big. So, there weren't very many of us to go around.
Right.
So lab band was just their way of saying big band, like
Mhm.
North Texas has 12 big bands and they're all called the 1 o'clock band, the 2 o'clock band, the 3 o'clock band.
Right.
And that's how they specify it. So they're all call them different things, but it's basically big band.
Cool. Um, so that's a lot of playing, and you're doing that 5 days a week. Um,
This
where
was usually like 2 days a week for the big band, and usually tried for 3 days a week with your combo.
Cool. So would you say in college were you playing the most of your entire career so far?
It's a really good question. I would say so, just because of all of the things that were coming up. I took 4 credit hour, um, I took 4 credit hour lessons, and so my teacher really said, that means you need to be playing 4 hours a day. I was not always the best at doing that,
Yeah.
but yeah. And then so when I realized that ensembles could count for that part of that 4 hours, because I'm still playing, I'm still learning things during those. So if I had 2 hours of rehearsal with other groups, then I had 2 hours of private practice, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I was sort of getting at with the end of my day basically is like after dinner, it was like the nighttime. If I didn't have anything else going on or any other classes, that's when I tried to get my individual private practice in,
Yeah.
you know.
So, being a smaller school, did you know all the drummers in your graduating class?
I was the only drummer graduating my year.
Oh, great. You're the guy then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
but I did know everyone. I was pretty close with everyone. The jazz degree was good at making sure that everyone knew everyone. It's not a big degree anyway,
Right.
but everyone knew everyone. We had a Monday night lecture where everyone in the degree had to come in for a seminar, they called it. And one combo that I mentioned earlier, which is the small 3, 4, 5 piece groups, had to play 3 tunes for the group every Monday night. So it was always a different combo each week. So that was one of those things where it was nerve-wracking to play in front of your peers because the teachers critiqued you in front of your peers, and
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes they would open it up to critique from the students. So
Yeah.
that was always a little nerve-wracking.
Right, yeah.
um, but it
Always
was
that
really
person
good.
that probably digs in a little too much.
Yeah, always. Yeah, yeah. Because you got to remember, at my school at least, it was not just undergrads, it was also master's students. No
Yeah.
one was getting their doctorate in it at the time, but it was also master's students.
Yeah.
So it was people who maybe left college and came back when they were 30 or whatever the case may be, but they had been playing for a while, so their skill level was here. When I was 18, I was here, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was really helpful and also really terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of gets you ready to be on the stage because everyone's judging you anyway out in the audience, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for
um,
sure.
yeah, dude. So getting back onto like whether or not you feel it was worth it, and obviously if it was free, it would totally be worth it. But we're talking about a loan the size of a house for music schools, um, and like looking back, one, do you feel like, oh man, I got every dime's worth? And two, if you went back, would you do it again? Maybe not jazz.
Both questions that I've pondered.
Yeah.
The with the did I get every dime's worth? I would say yes. I think I was in a situation, for me personally, it's different for everyone, but I didn't feel like I needed to go to a big school. I wanted to go somewhere where I felt like I could make the most of it and kind of mold it to be what I wanted it to be,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
what I was able to do at my school. Because of its size being smaller, it's not as big as some other schools.
yeah, and
So I was able to,
like less students per instructor is always great.
exactly. So having that ability to become best friends with my professor, which I did,
Yeah,
is, always a plus,
yeah,
um, being able to have that sort of connection with your teacher. So yes, I think I got my full money's worth. And if I went back, would I do it again? I think I would. You know, for me in my situation, it really kind of felt like my drum high school in a way.
yeah.
Um, because I only took private lessons for 2 years before I got to college.
Oh
And
wow.
that was from when I was 10 to 12. And from 5 to 10 and 12 to 18, other than what I got in band at
Mhm.
school, I was self-taught. So, um, when I got there, I was sort of behind the eight ball, as they say, with learning all the things that all these other kids just kind of like knew. Like I
Mhm.
didn't, I didn't know what a C7 chord was or what a diminished scale was or any of that kind of stuff because I never had the opportunity to learn it. I had one band director in high school. Shout out to her. She was incredible and she made me love it as much as I do.
Right.
But she's only one person and
Mhm.
has 100 kids in band. And she's got to kind of like, encourage me and encourage the students who were really big into music. But in the 4 years I was there, it was like me and maybe two or three other kids majored in music after high school.
Wow.
So there weren't a lot of kids like really into it, which meant there's no chance for a theory class or an aural skills class or things like that. And so it really kind of felt to me like when I got to college, it was like my drum high school in a lot of ways, where I was like trying to quickly learn a lot of the things that I should have learned before I got there.
Yeah, man. You brought up something that my students that are preparing for music school always bring up, and that's the theory, and that's the thing that scares all the drummers, right? I think it's amazing that you went there not knowing it, or well, right?
Yeah, actually,
Uh,
she printed me out a packet my senior year. It was like 100 pages, and she was like, "This is the basics of theory that you need to know before you get there on your audition day and take the test." Because if we're going to talk about doing music school, the other side of it is, um, you're just finding a teacher, right? You're just
mhm.
doing what you want to do. But with music school, you have to learn what they want you to learn too, to be able to get that piece of paper that says you did it, right? And theory and oral skills is part of that. You have to be able to not comprehensively, but confidently say you know how to do these things.
Right.
And with theory, to a lot of those students, I would say like you kind of have to search it out on your own. Unfortunately, a lot of high schools don't have that as an option.
Right.
And it's hard to find a teacher who really knows the stuff to teach them. It's almost
Yeah.
like you have to take piano lessons in addition to the drum lessons to really
Mhm.
be able to learn that stuff.
Yeah, man. Like I got lucky, I had theory in high school. But I'm in Philly suburbs. There's a lot of
Hmm.
kids, right? I graduated with like 600 kids or something like that. So, in my high school alone, the marching band's over 100 people. There's two band
Yeah.
classes, or actually
Yeesh.
three or four. But
Wow.
yeah. So a lot of musicians come out of there, and it's nice to actually see what it's like elsewhere. But so the jazz thing, right? Not a lot of gigs out there. What do you tell your students that want to go the jazz route for school, like a jazz
For
performance major?
yeah, I think that's always the running joke with jazz, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that there are a lot of students who are excited about it and what I would tell any student with them being interested in going the jazz route, um, oh, sorry, any student that wants to go the jazz route, um, is that you should be excited about it. If you don't feel like you're excited about doing it, why are you doing it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because you're not gonna have the, inspiration to sit down and learn the stuff. You're not gonna feel connected to it. And what's the point in spending a house loan if you're not excited about it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, are in your experience, right? I'm sure you searched around for a couple schools, and you know what's going on.
Hmm.
You're very, in the scene like I am. How do you? Is there really like a modern drummer school out there? Like, or are you going to be learning jazz everywhere? Are you going? Is there
Mm,
is there a place you can go that you know of where like I want to focus on funk the whole time or rock? I'm sure there's not
hmm.
really a rock college, but
No, I mean, I think that there are schools that do have that opportunity out there. Um, I think you have to look a little bit harder for them,
right,
um, because most of the time, the educational drum set way is jazz.
right,
So I think that is something that you really have to think about, right? A lot of the time, people look at college and say the educational way of learning drum set is through jazz. That is sort of the origin, and that's sort of a different conversation. But the origin of drum set playing in America is sort of jazz. So it's kind of like learning classical music for the piano. Well, we learned all of four chords from that to play modern music, but to learn the origins of piano playing, you have to learn classical. So it's sort of the same sort of thing, the way
hmm
I look at it.
yeah,
The unfortunate thing is there's not a lot of paying gigs out there because a lot of people don't understand what they're listening to when they listen to jazz,
right,
which was also me when I got to college. Like, I didn't have the opportunity to play in like a true jazz band. It was like high school jazz band, right? Where
right,
it's more of a rock band sort of thing
right.
than
More of a
a
2 and
jazz sort of
4
thing.
type of thing.
So I think the way I looked at it was if I can play jazz, I can play anything. And I think it's also an open conversation with your teacher.
hmm
You should be able to say, once you like learn the things they want you to learn and you start having conversations and lessons that are outside of just playing all these exercises that they give you from all these books, you start to have the conversation of like, this is what I'm really interested in. What if we played, Olio as a funk tune? Or what if we played Autumn Leaves as this style instead of this style? Oh, check out this really cool like Billy Cobham thing that he could, how would Billy Cobham play, Olio in a more funk context or rock
Yeah,
context? And you start to have those converstions. So it's not strictly like, it's not whiplash for 4 years, I
right, yeah.
guess.
That would be
So,
cool though. To have a psycho teacher like that.
oh
I would
man,
respond well to that type of thing. It's probably
you would,
the military
yeah,
training in me, but I like that type of thing.
yeah. I mean, you'd be a really good player after 4 years.
Yeah, you'd be so scared to mess up. So, the conversation that's always going through my mind, and as teachers, it's our job to really guide these kids, these students, to being great people, not just great drummers, right? And help set them up for success. So when they ask me the question on all this, in my mind, we've had this same discussion. I think you could go to audition for Berkeley, but that's going to cost you $250,000, maybe more. Um, or you could take a lot less money and hire the best drummers in the world to teach you. You could hire the same people that are at Berkeley to teach you privately, probably for less for 4 years if you really wanted to do it. Um, but you don't get the experience. You don't get the rooms. You don't get the hangs. You don't get to play with a ton of musicians. So there's like a give and take, right? Just in this being a millennial, right? Both of us,
Mhm.
um, money is so important right now, and things are so expensive. Like you go to Berkeley, there's a good chance you're not going to be able to buy a house until you're 35, 40.
Right.
So, and I'm not even trying to be funny. That's like real.
Yeah.
So like you're going to be paying $1,500 a month after school or more. So, where's your thought on that whole like I studied under Bernard Purdy. It was a lot of money once a week, and
Hmm.
I wouldn't have been able to afford to do that if I was also going to school. And I will, you know, before we really dive into this, I will say if I went back and redid it, I think, you know, I love the military. I did that for 6 years, went all over the world, but I think I probably would go to music school, you
Mm.
know, and just be in debt and probably not have this house I have. But that just, you know, being in my mid 30s as a professional drummer, I'm like, you know, I probably would have gotten a little better a little earlier, you know?
Hmm.
So I just said a lot. What do you think? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's all very interesting. I think as far as the money side of it, um, for me and my family situation with um, money going to college, it was always like, both my siblings went to college, and the thought process was, go to college. We want you to learn and have the best education possible in whatever you want to do. But we want you to have some sort of um, way that we're going to help you as much as we can, but you've got to sort of figure it out a little bit for yourself too.
Hmm.
um and I was fortunate enough to, when I auditioned, I got a really good scholarship from the College of Music. And so that's what I would say to a lot of students is, look, you really have to look and find the scholarships, because they're out there. There are a
Yeah.
lot of people who went through school, who donate back to the school that you want to go to, that you can get scholarships through. And there's also a lot of people who, in your local town, look for, there are scholarships that, maybe they're only $500, maybe they're only 1,000, but that starts to add up, and that pays for your books for a semester, or that pays for your meal plan for a semester. And I think a lot of that money goes ungiven, because students don't really know that you can look for that stuff.
Hmm.
So for me, it was a lot of scholarship through the school for my education and for my music playing abilities, if you want to put it that way. So by the time I got to my senior year, um, I wasn't really using any. The only reason I had some loans coming out was like to pay for housing, so I didn't have to
Yeah.
work full time. So my education, the tuition side of things, was completely paid for. So
Awesome.
sort of the long-winded answer of saying, there's scholarship out there if you want to find it. There's federal help if you want to find it, that's not just loans,
Hmm.
Pell Grant and different things like that, depending on your situation financially for you. Um, so I think that it's out there. You just have to kind of find it. For me, it wasn't important to sort of go to the name brand school, is kind of how I put it, with the Berkeleys and places like that are more well known. But if I had to change something, I would have looked at where I wanted to live after college and
And
go to
went to
school there.
see that's
Be-
smart because you make those
because
connections.
exactly,
Yeah.
you make the connections, and I still have the connections from college, and they're still, my friends, and you know, it's led to many opportunities for me still. However, um, I don't really have the call from the professor that was like the bass player at the school, you know,
Right. Yeah.
and say, oh, hey, the drummer can't play this gig up the street. You want to, you know, take this gig tonight. That isn't going to happen for me
Right.
because I left there. Now, a lot of a lot played into that, and I do not regret moving to Philadelphia at all. Moving
Mm.
to a big city, it's been nothing but amazing for me,
Mm.
fortunately, and I feel really lucky for that. Um, but I think that, you know, I would have maybe, if I had to change something, look at where you want to live and look for schools there.
Yeah.
Um, because then the connections with the fellow students, with the professors, the connections that you make while there's no pressure to keep a job, you know, while you're just learning and you're in
Mm.
that city or whatever, and you're out making friends and talking to people and all that still is going to be there after you graduate. So you're kind of making connections and making opportunity for yourself in a non um, stress situation.
Yeah, I never really thought about telling my students to, think about where they want to live, right? So maybe it is a good idea to go to college in Nashville or New York. Seems
Hmm.
like people are kind of leaving LA and going to Texas, but you know, it's how
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
going.
Austin has an incredible scene. New York still has a happening scene. Boston has a good scene. So like there's opportunity to look at schools also that aren't the schools you know in that area, you know?
Yeah.
Like Philadelphia has way more schools than I knew of. And a lot of them have even the county schools
Hmm.
that might only have a 2-year program have great recording or great, you know, whatever, and you didn't even know about it.
Hmm.
So I think it's more so one of those things. Now, I did also have a friend who did the touring thing for years, and then he went back to college, and I think he was 25 or so when he came back to school and started as a freshman. Um, and he had to be there for, I think, 4 years or something like that, four
Yeah.
or 5 years still. But he did the music thing in like a metal band, and then came back and did a jazz degree.
Yeah.
Um, and he, you know, sort of learned the ropes of it. He's not like a jazz drummer, but I think there's a lot to be said for if you can play jazz and you learn jazz and the history of like every genre that goes into that, because that's sort of a huge umbrella. um, you can probably find your way through anything.
Yeah. I will say jazz, like you mentioned earlier, that's like kind of the traditional route of learning. And if you learn it the right way, you're going to be a badass drummer, right?
Yeah.
If you take that and then understand, like, okay, now I'm going to work on funk and I need to hit the bass drum a little harder or the snare backbeat a little stronger, things, right? A lot of times jazz guys try to get a rock gig and they're not playing loud enough and it just sounds wimpy. So as long as drummers can really understand the genre, they're fine. But I think, for any of you listening to this, if you're looking for a new teacher, well, other than the two of us, uh, um, look at the colleges in your area, go online, figure out who's teaching, and if you would be, if you wanted to take private lessons with them, reach out. They're probably going to say yes because they need money too, just like all of us, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And the other thing, sorry, I
no, you're
didn't
good.
mean to interrupt you. The other thing that is a big part of my high school experience was doing the honor band at the college I ended up going to. So if you're in band in high school out there and you think that you know what college you want to go to as a junior, or you think you might be interested in that college as a junior, see if they have an honor band. See if you can audition and go for a weekend, and they have you play with the concert band and all of that, but you are there and you can make an appointment to talk to the professor of your instrument, drums or whatever, um, and sit down and go, this is what I'm interested in doing. I'm really interested in this school. You know, tell me more about the program, tell me more about what I really need to be able to do, to be able to get into this school.
Yeah.
And he told me, you need to buy this book, you need to go learn that book, and come and take a lesson with me. And that's exactly what I did. And before I left the audition to get into college, he told me I was in, because I made those connections
Yeah.
while I was still in high school. So if you think you know where you want to go and it's not that far away, see if they have an honor band weekend. I bet they do.
Right. And I think what you did right there was show, you know, that professor that you wanted it, right?
Right.
I think
Right.
that's important too. Like,
Absolutely.
you know.
And that's
Like,
important even if you're just going to take lessons with them. You
Mhm.
can't just like email them once and say, hey, I want to take lessons. Yeah, like a million people do that.
right.
But you have to like show them that you want, this is why I want to learn from you. You're
Yeah.
not just like the first name on the list.
Yeah, with Bernard, man, I called him 2 or 3 times. I called another number that I had found on the internet for somebody else that worked with him twice. And then randomly he just called me like a week later, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So like I didn't give up on it, and it changed everything for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. Well, I think, you know, that's everything I really wanted to talk about. Hopefully there's somebody out there that this will help, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, you know, this is a new thing I'm doing on the channel. It's not to be, you know, I'm not mixing it up with our podcast that I do with Drum Man 190. But I think it would be kind of cool to have you on a couple times and just drum talk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we should continue this conversation.
Yeah, man. Totally.
This is fun.
Totally. Absolutely. So thanks so much for coming on, dude. I do want to make sure we hit your, you know, people can find you on Instagram. Tucker
Yep.
C. Marshall, right? That's
Yep.
it. Not the
Yep.
snowboarder, Tucker Marshall.
Not the snowboarder. Yeah. Yeah.
So hit him up on Instagram. Send him a message if you got any questions. He'll respond to you. He's a super friendly guy, unless you make him angry. No. So thanks so much, everyone, for watching. We both really appreciate it. Take care.
All right. Thanks.